and they're the values that we're asking the government to recommit to. Unfortunately, that commitment is a little thin. In 1917, Britain issued the Balfour Declaration promising a land that it recognized as having Palestinian inhabitants, between quotation marks, to a European people. This colonial act, like many other colonial acts, the divisions of North Africa, Africa, and the Middle East at Sykes-Picot, and the settlement of Aotearoa, are steeped in colonial racism. Colonialism has left a painful legacy in Sudan, Palestine, and here in Aotearoa. British powers exploited resources, they exploited people, and they exploited communities, leaving behind division and long steeped injustices. In Sudan, colonial authorities extracted resources and enslaved people and used them in their colonial armies on the other conquests of the region. Within Palestine, we are linked by a Nubian element of our Palestinian population, the Nubian Palestinians, who moved with the British and at the hands of the British to Palestine at the turn of the last century. Here in Aotearoa, Maori have faced similar oppression. Te Tiriti o Watangi was meant to protect Maori rights, and yet today, under a false agenda of equality, they attack and retreat those very commitments made over 100 years ago. This so-called equality agenda ignores the deep structural racism in New Zealand. It treats Maori rights as a political bargaining chip while denying the real need for justice and equity. You've all heard the recent soundbite messages by MPs and the government stating that we have called for a ceasefire in Palestine. Repeated calls for a ceasefire are empty words without action. Just as this government claims equality at home while ignoring systemic racism, it offers empty compassion abroad, turning its back on those who need real support. It turns its back on those values we were all brought up with as Kiwis, as Sudanese, as Palestinians, of universal human rights for all. The ceasefire soundbite reflects a colonial mindset that values appearances over authenticity, selectively valuing some lives over other lives. New Zealand has provided about $4 million to Sudan. It's provided about $20 million to Gaza, all through humanitarian NGOs. Often, along with the "we've called for a ceasefire" soundbite, the New Zealand government says we are too small to have an impact. But it's donated $100 million in training, military, and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. It has sent soldiers to the United Kingdom to help train Ukrainian soldiers at huge cost to the New Zealand taxpayers. We don't need to be a large nation to make a difference. We need to be a nation that's committed to our own values and applies consistency and integrity across the board. Selective support is rooted in colonialism and racism. It is a belief that some lives are worth more than others, and nothing is more blatant when you look at the numbers, the facts. 100 million compared to a total of 25 million for two different conflicts. About 800, I think, Ukrainian refugees were granted asylum or were granted special category visas here in New Zealand. And another comment the government keeps saying is that Gazans and Palestinians can't get out of Gaza. They also say we can't let in every single refugee in reference to Sudan. But we're not asking for every single refugee. We're asking for our families. We want our families to be united in New Zealand. What is so difficult for this government to understand that Kiwis coming from abroad living here are in deep, heartfelt anguish trying to make sure their families come out? It is not going to be a big burden on the New Zealand government. It is not going to be a big burden on the New Zealand taxpayer to reunite our families. And if they are Ukrainian families that can be reunited, or if they were families from other European backgrounds, do we not think that the New Zealand government would go all out to make sure they got here? New Zealand has repeatedly over the years pledged to protect human rights and voiced its commitment to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Geneva Conventions. It also says it's committed to Te Reti Te Oatangi and commits to uphold Maori rights here. But real commitments, standing by these values, is in actions, not in words. Whether supporting Maori rights here or human rights abroad, our compassion should be consistent, sincere, and free of bias and prejudice. We have a government that got elected on a platform of law and order. But law and order here in New Zealand repeatedly means law and order for Maori people, for people of colour. It doesn't mean investment in white-collar crime. And it doesn't mean investment in upholding the legal instruments that our forefathers, the veterans of World War II, put together to protect all people in conflict. If we're committed to those values, we need to state them strongly through actions. Today we demand real action from the New Zealand government. We demand an increase in humanitarian aid for Gaza and Sudan. It doesn't need to be 100 million, but it needs to be a lot more than what it is. We demand an expand to the refugee visas and the special category visas for both Palestinians and Sudanese, for our family, for our whenua. Let New Zealand's actions reflect equal values for all lives, standing true to justice and compassion without discrimination. Together, let's reject selective compassion. What is more important thing in the world than its people? Aha te mea nui o te ao, e tangata, e tangata, e tangata. The people, the people, the people. Kia ora.